we have a special guest this morning, Justin Scott from the Iowa chapter. And actually, Chris has been studying up on him and is going to talk. And I actually get to run the panel over here on the side today. So this is awesome. I'm excited.
Well, when we say studying up, I did a bit of research, through the day, as you do, I guess, in preparation. I had a bit of a quiet old day. So, and for those who don't know it, I'm actually so politics was one of my majors. So history and politics were my majors. And I've got plans on doing postgraduate studies in it. So politics is something that greatly interests me. So when you have politics and religion combining, it's just kind of like it's like my Super Bowl. So it gave me an excuse to have a look at a few things, and I thought, well, why not see who this Justin Scott guy is and what he's all about, and so I think just based on the conversation we've already had in the pre-show, I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And I think the biggest challenge we're going to have is keeping it into an hour. But
right.
We'll do our best, and worst case scenario, we'll have to go again and do it another time. But
there you go.
So, I guess one thing I want to open with, and it's something I noticed, is you do take a very non-partisan approach to it. So a lot of the time, I guess an issue that I've seen in the atheist community in general is most of the atheist community seems to be fairly open about being, I guess, liberal or to the left, whereas you've sort of, without knowing what your political views are, you're happy to talk to everyone. So I guess what do you think the importance is of being able to engage with the greater community on behalf of the atheist community?
Well, holy cow. Let me try to unpack that in about 3 minutes. First off, if I can get some formalities out of the way, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. I think this is a wonderful, very unique approach, this whole morning show thing. Most of the interviews or discussions that I've done have been, let's record at like midnight, and in 3 weeks we'll have the video up. So this is kind of refreshing, and it's exciting. So with that, I try my hardest to keep my own personal political views and opinions as much either to myself or at least confined to my own personal Facebook page and Twitter account. But when I'm in my official role as state director for Iowa, it's very important that I try to commit myself to being as impartial as I can, because the more I do this, the more I realize there are atheists on the entire, I don't even want to call it a spectrum, more like, I don't know what a sphere. There's not really corners to it, especially when you start dabbling into the libertarian viewpoint where they have a foot in both sides of it. And I think if you can start with the premise of, we are united because we don't have a belief in a God. We are united because we, hopefully reject a government that is guided by one particular faith. And if we can agree on those two things, then that bond is strong no matter what your political ideologies are, because it kind of reminds me of a rubber band. As long as the integrity of the middle of the rubber band is fine, you can pull that thing out nice and far in any which way. I think our community just needs to keep in mind, we are a rubber band, not to give a silly analogy, but it's okay to bend this way and that way, as long as the center stays nice and strong. So
as far as, I guess if you want to give us a bit of an overview, because I've done some research today, and obviously I know you were fairly active in the 2016 campaign, talking to as many of the political candidates, which would have been a larger effort, considering there was primaries on both sides of the Republicans and the Democrats. This time, obviously, it's probably a more narrow field, with probably a few, I guess, favorites left in the Democrats before the caucus starts, and obviously Iowa is a fairly important one. How have you found the conversations going so far?
Yeah, great question. 2016 was a little bit more adversarial. It was a little bit more based on confrontation, because we had, now I'm going to tip my hand a little bit, but we had way more Republicans. So we had more people that were more likely to support a government that was heavily influenced or guided directly by religion. And we all know what their favorite religion is. It goes without saying. So I was able to walk into these events kind of with more of an attitude of like, you need to tell me why I should give a shit about you. And this year it's been much more about how do we come together? How do we get the political machine to give a damn about us? Because it was proven 4 years ago that we are now the single largest voter bloc. Now that's not atheists, that's atheists and non-religious folks. Now the poll doesn't specifically break it down by the definition, but I think what's so troubling to me is that no matter what side you're dealing with, it's as if we don't exist. Even despite what the polls say, even despite what the Pew Research Group says, even despite my activism, and now the activism of several other Iowans that are starting to come out and go, wow, this isn't that hard. Like, all I have to do is, sometimes the weather and the temperatures are harder than the access to the candidate or, delivering the question. So I've really felt that this go round has been much more of an ongoing conversation with the candidates and less of a gotcha moment, trying to make a big headline or a big splash, if that makes sense.
So with, and I guess if we look at the 2016 campaigns, I did notice, and one of the things that impressed me and I thought was very rare within the atheist community is there was a photo of you getting a selfie with Donald Trump. That would almost be taboo for a lot of people. But there was also Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and a few of the others. I think you mentioned that you found Jeb Bush was actually someone who was fairly open and easy to have a conversation with.
It's fascinating when you see their personas on TV, when you watch the 24-hour news cycles, and you have these people that come off as one way. And then when you meet them in a coffee shop or a pizza shop in, BFE, Iowa, and all of a sudden they want to just chat with you. One of my favorite stories is the first time I ever did any atheist activism. It was with Rick Santorum, a notorious conservative Christian in the United States. And he was pleasant. Like, he actually really enjoyed it. Now, then again, there was a whole buffet of food behind him. So as we're talking, literally, you can watch the videos. He's like reaching behind him, getting like fried chicken, and then he's reaching behind him and he's getting pizza. So, he at least had food, but he wasn't bothered by my questions, and he wasn't bothered by the fact that I was there to ask him about atheism and church-state separation and things like that. So I think the biggest thing I always try to tell folks is just expect the unexpected. I know that's a cliche, but if you go into these events saying to yourself, okay, I've seen this candidate, they've been a jerk, and they're gonna be like this, your whole approach could be tainted a little bit when they're not like that. So, I'll go the other way around. A good example is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders probably supports our cause more than any other candidate. Now, this is not an endorsement, but he's not a fun guy to talk to. And I'm not trying to rag on him. I've interacted with him about 4 or 5 times. And although he hits it out of the park with his answers, just from a conversational standpoint, it's very fascinating that Rick Santorum was more enjoyable to talk to, despite how horrible his answers were, than, say, a Bernie. It's fascinating.
So do you think it's fair to say that I guess and it's probably part of the social media cycle, and I guess the way that the media themselves sort of portray the different candidates. Do you think there's a lot of misunderstanding and probably misrepresentation of who these candidates are and potentially what their views are on issues such as church-state separation?
First off, I don't want to sound like a certain segment of our population, but I don't think the media does us any favors. I think, especially when you talk about church-state separation, that's an issue that never gets brought up. It never gets talked about. It never gets asked. I would almost like to go the other way and focus more on us as a voter bloc and ask, why don't we get more press time? When you see these stories coming out of Iowa, a lot of times you'll see, so-and-so was at this event, and as a Catholic, they felt that this was important, and this is why they came out to see this candidate. But I've had individuals that have gone out, broadcast that they're an atheist, and that part never gets brought up. So it's this weird like, oh, well, you're an atheist. Well, I don't care about that. Why should we care about that? So not only does our community have an uphill climb with the candidates and dealing with their, our perceptions of them, and also the perceptions that the media tries to give us of these individuals, but straight up, it's how we are viewed as a voter bloc and as part of the electorate.
Do you think that's potentially something that, I guess it's a bit of an issue we've created for ourselves, I guess, by, and look, I don't know how organized American Atheists is in the US. I am aware of them, but in general, I guess my impression is, or what I've found is, atheists don't tend to be organized, but tend to prefer to play in the political team sports, right? And just back their preferred team or their preferred candidate, rather than actually standing up for, I guess, what's better for the greater atheist good. Do you think that that's a bit of an issue we've created for ourselves at all?
Yeah, I've been in this world for 5 years now, so I am no expert. Mm-hmm. But I'm part of this unique generation where not only do I remember a time where we didn't have internet, we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones, but on the same token, I can't live without my phone. I mean, even this interview is being done on my phone because my laptop won't work. But with that said, I think for me personally, and this might rub a lot of folks wrong, but I'm tired of the internet warrior atheist. And I'm not saying not to be critical. I'm not saying not to speak up, because don't get me wrong, that's a vital part of our activism. Part of Atheist Engage is to engage with your elected officials in any way possible. Go on Facebook, go on Twitter, talk with them, do more than just send an email and hope and cross your fingers that they respond. But I get tired of when folks that go out and try to make a difference and then post about it get ripped apart by folks inside the community that should just be applauding the fact that they even went out and did this thing. I get so sick and tired of people that will try to go out and actually, let me make sure I phrase this right. I love when people go out and they try to ask a question to a candidate, whether it's a school board candidate or a presidential candidate. But then when they come into their social media space or a private group and they say, look what I did this thing. Isn't this awesome? You get that jerk in the back of the room that always has to say, well, I would have done it like this. And why didn't you wear this outfit? And why did you do you know what? I don't care what you think at that point. Because if we're not willing to prop ourselves up in the community to say, great job, you went out and did a thing that probably 98% of our population won't do, our atheist population won't do, can't do, and will find 84 excuses for why they didn't do it. And now you want to tear down this person who bravely went out, probably took an hour off of work to go do this? Get out of here. Like, that's not the atheism that I want to be a part of. And if activism is not your thing, just admit it and move on. But don't try to tear down the people that are willing to try this. And I'm not speaking just about me and my efforts. I'm saying I have seen folks that have gone out, tried this. Maybe the question wasn't the best. Maybe they struggled with something. That's okay. Give them a break.
Yeah, and that's it, because we all have to start somewhere, don't we? So I guess, is there an easy solution, or is there a hard solution for that? I guess you can't control what people do online, and I guess right. I like to say, as atheists, we are a fairly broad church of ideas and thoughts, and I know when it comes to politics, people can get so passionate and they can get so upset and angry and very tribal. Is there an easy solution? Is it a case of in the US, do you need to almost have an atheist, a Democrat atheist and a Republican atheist sort of branch?
Right.
I think individual lobbies.
I think for me,
I'm sorry. It just seems like a Republican branch of atheism wouldn't last at all. It's in our modern culture. It's almost yeah. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that out there. Republican atheists, all good. There might be a few of them, but
right.
It's funny you say that, actually, because one of the things, and I'll put my cards on the table. I'm right leaning, but I'm right leaning in Australia, which is very different to the US. Our politics are more center. And because I do,
if you don't mind me jumping in, could you give us an American politician that you kind of, so that we could relate to in terms of your politics?
Good question.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
Pretty center.
Okay.
Hillary Clinton probably would have been in our right-leaning party. She probably would have been a moderate in our right-leaning party.
Yeah. Old guard Republican before they went.
It's
yeah.
Our right-leaning party is called the Liberal Party, so that gives you a bit of an idea. So,
so you're kind of like a 1992 Newt Gingrich minus the social issues type of Republican.
That's probably not a bad way to put it, I guess. Look, it's our right-leaning party. We call it it's a broad church as well. So it's we've got far-right conservatives, I guess, but not to the same extent. Like, I'll put it this way: someone like a Ted Cruz probably would struggle to find a place in a mainstream party in Australia.
Wow.
He's over there.
His views are probably too far to the extreme. He'd probably find himself in. We've got the two major parties that kind of sit centre left, centre right, and then we've got the Greens, which are the far left. So someone like a Bernie Sanders would end up in the Greens. And then we've got, I guess, the far right is One Nation, and they're a whole special case to themselves. They're a bit of a sort of.
Are they like the supremacist, or are they? Is that kind of equivalent?
Yeah, there's a little bit of. They've probably got supremacist support, but they're not really that way themselves. If that makes sense, they say a lot of popular things like they're protectionists, closed borders. They want to have Judeo or Christian refugees come in before Islamic refugees. So they attract about 2% of the vote.
There's a little bit of a saying here that goes, "Not all Republicans are racist, but all racists are Republicans."
I'm just going to take my coffee on that one.
Sorry, I'm to the left, so I'm going to go that way.
As a political historian, I could give you a few examples, but
also as politically, oftentimes I hear people go, "Oh yeah, but the Democrats did this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but the political parties changed twice."
Right.
And to sit there and go, Lincoln was a conservative is wrong. He was a liberal, even though he was a Republican.
Right.
So,
Right.
A lot of people come in and like, "Oh, in the 1930s, the conservatives gave us Social Security." That's not true.
Right.
The parties changed. The name of the party changed. So if you say conservative and liberal, you're more aptly through time describing the two different groups. But if you say Republican and Democrat, then you're going to get screwed up over time.
From a historical view, we'd probably have a good conversation about this, and we may not agree. But I think probably what I would say here, and a good point that Justin was bringing up before, and I guess a point I was trying to get across is we don't tend to unite as much as an atheist bloc.
Right.
We always tend to, we start to, and there's that little voice inside my head's going, talk, and I'm having to go, breathe. No,
right.
We're gonna breathe.
Well, if you don't mind me jumping in, and only because I have a little Post-it note that tells me when I've got to jump off the discussion to take my two older ones to school, I think that's a perfect segue into why am I even on this show this morning. And my main reason is that unity amongst atheists. And it's with saying, my state's about to get done with all their craziness, but eventually that whole circus is going to up and it's going to go to New Hampshire. And so what I'm hopeful of is that we can get this show out there, get it in front of folks in New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, and then get really ready for Super Tuesday. And what I mean by that is whatever means possible, whichever degree of activism the listener, the viewer of this show wants to go about, I'm here for them. I want them to understand that in the last two presidential cycles, I feel like I've laid down a rough blueprint of what's possible, of what works, what doesn't work. And there's no reason why, whether you're the most liberal, Bernie-loving atheist, or you are the most far-right, small government, give every new child born in this country a pistol type of conservative, I think we have an opportunity to impact this thing. But it's going to take folks that are willing to get up off their ass and go out and do it. And so I'm throwing down the gauntlet right now that I'm challenging every viewer to do something and to report back to the show, report back to me, show us, what did you do? Shoot a video, send it to us, tag the show in it, tag me, put hashtag Atheist Voter on Twitter so that American Atheists can see it. There's so many different things that you could do, that I want to see what is the next creative idea. What's the next creative bit of activism that we can do that will either help normalize atheism, help bring atheism and non-religion into the political conversation, let the candidates know that we give a crap not just about church-state separation, but the fact that almost every single issue facing our country can be traced back to church-state separation in some fashion. So again, right now, I want to challenge your viewers, those that are watching the live stream, as well as those that may watch this, an hour from now, a week from now. What are you going to do in New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina to help this? Because in 2016, one of the most frustrating parts, I'll say this and then I'll shut up.
Yep.
But one of the most frustrating parts is that I did this, what I felt was amazing. Now looking back on it, it was incredible. Just not only the access, but what I did with the access. And I thought for certain that it was going to inspire somebody. And it never happened. It never happened. And that was so frustrating. Like, come on. So 2020 is our year, damn it.
So what advice would you give to someone, I guess, who is watching and is thinking, well, okay, I do want to do something, and they're not sure how to approach it or to go about it. What did you, I guess, what lessons did you learn going in blind? And I guess, like you said, not being an expert on it, but obviously going in and being effective. How can other people get in and be effective in a similar way or even in their own unique way?
Well, basically follow your lead. You didn't know much about me before the show, and you went out and did a little bit of research. And, whether that means grabbing a notebook and just taking notes on everything and keep it in your back pocket. Go to Google, type in a search for my name and put in the phrase Iowa Atheist afterwards, and just click the news tab and just look at everything that I've ever done and just say, ooh, I don't like that. Ooh, hey, I love that. Hey, I can do that. Because a lot of the things I did, basically everything I did, doesn't come with any special talents. It didn't require any special degrees. You can go out and affect change very easily just by trying. Just go out and do it. You're going to mess up. You're going to ask a stupid question. That you're going to have a candidate roll their eyes at you.
That's the thing. And people got to understand, if you go out and you're waving the atheist flag and you're getting your voice out there politically, you can't stuff it up, really. If
right.
you ask the wrong question, if you think you could have done something better, so what? The main thing, you're getting a voice out there. I do think it is important to engage with as many people as possible. One thing that when I came out, I guess, as someone who was right-leaning and an atheist, I did get a lot of messages that surprised me, actually, the amount of, I guess, right-leaning, and especially in the States, I guess, Republican atheists that are, obviously, they're operating within a party that does have a very fundamentalist Christian base, and certainly isn't shy about appealing to that base. What advice would you give to, I guess, those people who maybe do lean that way? What can they do from within to start to, I guess, activate change?
Chip away at the boulder in the road. And you know what? This has been a hot topic in even my little Iowa world lately. If I can share one of the crazy things I did recently, I manage probably like 10 different atheist Facebook pages, and they're all geographically based. So one's Northeast Iowa, one's Northwest Iowa, one's Southeast Iowa, etc. And I started finding when Republicans in those areas were having meetings, and I would find their Facebook event, and then I would share the event to the atheist page, encouraging viewers to, if you're a conservative or Republican atheist, you should go to this meeting. You should totally go to this meeting and just remind them that we don't need prayers to start your meeting. You're not un-American for not saying the pledge. What are we doing about the platform, the party platform? Because the fun thing is, on February 3rd, what a lot of Iowans don't realize is that we can change the platforms from within on that night. We can submit what are called planks, which are just basically forms with an opinion on it, where we can say, hey, line 4 of your party platform, we don't like that. We want it to be changed. And I've actually had success with this. Probably, I think it was the 2008 caucus. I was in a much bigger county, and I was able to get them to add, they had a part in their platform where we will support candidates no matter their race, religion, blah, blah, blah. And I had them add or lack thereof after religion.
Oh, brilliant.
And it was a very small thing. It didn't garner a lot of headlines, But now for the future of that party in that county, any candidate that's openly atheist or closeted atheist can read that and say, wow, like they're talking about me. They recognize me.
So I know that obviously you've got parts of the US, especially in the South, where you've got the Bible Belt, is very religious. How does Iowa stack up as far as, I guess, how active is Christianity, or I guess any other religions in Iowa itself?
Christianity makes up, I think the last time I checked, between like 75 and 85% of the state, in terms of when you look at the US Census, when they ask, do you consider yourself religious? Are you openly religious? What faith do you belong to? The Pew Research has a study about that as well. Mm-hmm. So, but just like everywhere in the country, you're starting to see that drop, which is exciting. And it's interesting too, because you could relate that to the political parties. And before I became an atheist, I never made the connection between Christianity and the Republican Party. And boy, now that I'm in it, it's almost as if Iowa sees these other super conservative Bible Belt states and goes, I want that. Like, we're not doing enough. Like, we need that. So recently when our governor passed the abortion ban at 6 weeks, there were people even within the Republican Party here that went, wait a minute, like you never ran on this. You never said that this was going to be your issue of choice. And so then like we were saying before the show started, just this session, within the first 3 days of opening up the session, we're already talking about a constitutional amendment that would take away the state's, the people in the state of Iowa's right, the women of Iowa's right to an abortion. Like, how do you kick off a session with that? Like, hey, welcome back. Oh, by the way, give me those rights. They're mine.
Well, this will give you an interesting insight on, I guess, the difference between politics in our countries. So in my state, which is New South Wales, which is the largest state in Australia, it was actually our Liberal government, which is our right-leaning government, that just passed laws legalizing abortion.
Really? Oh, wow.
It's interesting when I hear all these different sort of I guess we're very similar in our two countries, but when it comes to politics, I think our parties are just chalk and cheese. So it's quite interesting.
Well, and it doesn't help in the United States when you've had a political party and an ideology hijacked by a very powerful, influential, and very affluent ideology. Or so when the religious right comes in, for what it's worth, if nobody's seen the show The Family on Netflix, definitely, I don't mean to prop up a show, but holy scary Batman, to see how the forces that be within Christianity have kind of, I always get asked, when you live in Iowa, what's scarier, a flood or a tornado? And, the movie Twister made tornadoes seem like they were these crazy creatures that could find you in a truck on the side of a road and they would turn and they would come get you. I'll tell you what, give me a tornado anytime. Now, I say that as somebody that's never experienced an EF5, but, like a flood, it just finds its way in some way. And in many ways, weaponized Christianity is basically like the flood that we just can't push back right now. And it's scary.
Do you think, because I guess the importance of the Iowa caucus, and for those who I guess aren't overly familiar with how politics works, and in particular in the US, the Iowa caucus is the first one to vote. Is that correct?
Yes, we're the first state to actually quote unquote cast their vote. Yep.
So it will set the tone for, I guess, if you do poor in the Iowa caucus, generally you'll find a lot of candidates will drop out, or it's start to consider options, or ones who perform well will be able to garner more support, start to raise better money. Do you think because of the importance of the Iowa caucus, you do get the more extreme fundamentalist groups that will come in and try and push the political narrative towards?
Absolutely. And I want to clarify too, we're not actually voting for the president right now. What we're trying to do is determine which candidate on both sides, because technically there are people running against Trump right now for the Republican ticket, which is interesting. I mean, does that even make sense, or is that worth our time to talk about? Probably not. But not only do you see other forces come in, but you see the candidates really go fringy with their message, because even though Christianity is on the decline, it's still very appealing to only focus on faith. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Pete Buttigieg's campaign. He has been very open. His campaign has been very open about the importance of wearing religion on his sleeve and trying to draw distinctions between his version of it, versus the weaponized kind. Now, I get that. I understand it. I think it's a good strategy as an Iowan, but as an atheist, I'm so tired of it. I'm so sick and tired of hearing it, but I get it. And it's just fascinating to see at what point does this, number one, we may not have another Iowa caucus the way we do this time in the next 4 years, because there's talks about, will the Democratic Party change it up? Will they force a more inclusive type of treatment for all the states, where other states get a shot at being first? I think it's interesting, because I would agree that we do not represent, the United States overall. But it'll be, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this changes. But you're exactly right, because if you don't do well in Iowa, you start to see the money dry up. You start to see donors start to go to the popular candidate. So anyway, Pete Buttigieg's plan makes sense, but it's just annoying if I can. And again, these are my statements, not American Atheist statements.
That's fine. So one thing I noticed, you had a conversation with Elizabeth Warren where you suggested that she have a non-faith advisor or a non-religious advisor, and
yes,
she did mention that she would get in touch or get someone from her team to get in touch with you and have that conversation. Has that conversation happened?
Yeah. So first off, I want to tip my hat to Sarah Beth Kaplan. That was originally her idea. They had written an op-ed with the Friendly Atheist on Hemmett's blog. And I also want to thank Hemmett for putting this out there to the masses, because that's where I got the idea. And it was definitely in response to Mr. Buttigieg's campaign, where he has a faith director. And so the thought that I had was, well, if a leading candidate has one just for the religious folks, why not have one for us atheists and non-religious voters? So it was a very positive, constructive conversation. They put me in contact with Elizabeth's state director in Iowa. We've had some really good conversations. They have basically told me that they have no plans to follow up with it and actually create one, which is, disappointing. But I think now the seeds have been planted, and I think now it should be easier for other activists around the country to bring that back up and say, hey, I remember in Iowa, you said something about bringing on a secular outreach director. Why haven't you done that for my state? So if you're in Nevada or South Carolina, especially, yes, the religious vote's going to be pandered to like crazy, especially in South Carolina. But I think for South Carolina voters, bring that up. Hey, campaign, I haven't heard from you. Why? We've got organized groups here across South Carolina. Why aren't you talking to us? Why aren't you coming and doing forums here?
Do you think there's a bit of an assumption, I guess, from certain sides of politics that they've got the atheist vote stitched up in a way? I guess the same way that one side will probably think that they've got the fundamentalist Christian vote sort of tied up. Do you think there's that impression, I guess, and there's less effort, I guess, like a Republican campaigning in California, for instance?
I think it comes down to this: we have never given them a reason to care about us. We have never flexed. Yeah, we've never flexed our muscle, and I think it's going to take more than just big time groups. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of them, and they do great work. American Atheists, Freedom from Religion Foundation, American Humanists, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. I'm trying not to miss anybody, but it's got to be more than just national groups. It's got to be people on the ground that are willing to go out and confront these folks from a grassroots level. It's got to be people that are willing to sit in Elizabeth Warren's selfie line for that one chance when you get up there and she's like, hey, how are you? Just go, hi, I'm an atheist. Why don't you talk to us? And she'll, just totally catch them off guard so that it's constantly on their mind. And then when you take that selfie, jump back on Twitter, post it, and then tag, her in it and call out the campaign and say, hey, today this atheist in South Carolina went out and talked to Elizabeth. And I'm curious, again, why you don't talk to us. And just almost be belligerent about it. Just be so persistent that you don't give them any other choice. And I want to send a shout out to the LGBT community, because what they were able to do from about, I don't even know where the starting time is, but how they made their issues and their rights a central focus in this country to where they are now is such a remarkable achievement that I think our community needs to really look at and be like, wow, what can we take from what they did and incorporate it into what we're doing? And I want to go another way, especially on the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement. I think looking at what women had to do in this country to achieve their rights, and don't get me wrong, there's so many others, the civil rights movement as well. We are not being discriminated against on that level. So I want to make that distinction, that I'm not trying to say that the injustices against us are anywhere close to what women, LGBT folks, Black folks, African Americans have ever experienced. But I want to say we should look at the way they struggled and what they did in response to use it as a model for what we could do. What things could we take from that?
So what have you seen from those movements? I mean, obviously, if you suffragettes, they were having marches in the street and sort of throwing themselves in front of a lot of civil disobedience. Do you think that might be a stretch too far, or do you think things, I guess, like I guess you look at, I know technically they're a religion, but I guess say the activism of the Satanic Temple, with their Baphomet statues, is that an effective way, or what you see? What's the long-term vision, or what's the long-term plan that we can put in place, learning from those previous movements?
I'm going to speak in some generalities that are probably going to not answer your question, but I think it comes down to, you've got to be persistent. You need to be relentless, but I also think you need to be creative. This is the first time in our country's history where we are connected to one another in such a crazy amount of ways that, I mean, literally you're seeing in the Middle East that entire revolutions are happening because of social media. And so if we don't utilize all the assets that we have and put together just a coalition of like-minded individuals, that includes religious folks. We've got to keep in mind that this is not just an atheist thing. Like, yes, we want to normalize atheism, but if we always push away religious folks and always demonize them and say, oh, you're just out to get me, I can't bring you into this, I think we're missing an opportunity with that.
Absolutely.
And I think, and 4 years ago, I would have never told you that. 4 years ago, I would have scoffed at that. I would have been like, oh, forget that. But after you've been in this long enough, sometimes our strongest allies, actually sometimes our strongest activists and loudest voices for our cause are religious folks. One person in Iowa inspired the hell out of me. It was Robin Stone, one of the greatest activists that I've ever seen. She was this woman that, I believe, if I remember her story correctly, her insurance wouldn't cover her medical treatments that were so important for her. So she just went out and started talking about it. She started fighting for it. When our state governor decided to pass a proclamation that all Iowans should go out and read their Bible on the grounds of the courthouse, I mean, literally, these Christians, Christian fanatics, not all Christians, rushed to the courthouse like, oh, this is our chance. We can bring more people to Jesus. Robin got a hold of me. She's a Christian. She said, I can't stand this. I need to do something about this. What can I do? She joined me on the courthouse ground. She went and stood with this very lightning rod of an atheist in Iowa and basically stood in opposition to her fellow Christian peers, because she didn't feel that it was right what they were doing. They were weaponizing their religion, and she had a problem with that, because to her, her faith was about doing good. It was about bringing people together. It was about helping the vulnerable, all those things. So I just feel like if we can use Robin Stone and keep that name in mind, Robin was the epitome of how the religious and the non-religious can come together. So I definitely encourage folks to Google the name Robin Stone, Iowa. Look at her life story, her life accomplishments. Be like that. Keep that in mind.
So how are you organising? This is actually a question from other Chris. How are you organising with other American Atheist chapters in other states? So I guess are you able to pull them into Iowa in the same way that that you would, I guess, the religious right, or the religious movements would pull from other states, or just in general, I guess, carrying on your work once the Iowa caucus is done?
The exciting thing is we have some very amazing, passionate, creative individuals that have stepped up to the challenge, that have said, I will be the state director for the state. I will be a state director for my city. It's kind of a small difference between that, but we have amazing folks all over the American Atheist Network, and we have this army that we're building. And I hate to speak in military terms, but you know, like you said, when we have candidates that don't even think we exist, and now all of a sudden 4 years later, we've got people in place. We're starting to inspire people. We're starting to write letters to the editor, op-eds, having our quotes ran in major news articles. That average atheist that is just trying to go to work and pay their bills starts to see that and says, wow, you know, like, this is good stuff. Like, I have hope for the future. How can I get involved? And I think it's great because every director is facing their own unique issues inside their state. So that, yes, they can look at what I've done and try to copy it, but they also add their own little spin to it. I am working with a guy named Tim Ward in Oklahoma. He's the state director down there. Oklahoma is a completely different world than Iowa, but in many ways we're the same. We still have a weaponized Christianity that has hijacked the Republican Party. We have a Republican Party that's hell-bent on social issues all these years later. And Tim is doing this amazing work. He gets a hold of me the other day and says, hey, Elizabeth Warren's coming to my town. What do I do? What do I ask him? You know, what do I ask her? And I said, boy, do I have a story for you. And while he wasn't able to ask her the question, the fact that we had people in other states ready to do this, it just lights a fire in me. And I think it's so exciting.
And I guess that's something I really want to encourage everyone who is an atheist and in the US to do at the moment, is go out and ask that question. Ask about when are they going to have a non-religious advisor, as you know, to along with their religious advisor. Now, I believe Bernie doesn't have a religious advisor, so you can, I guess, understand him not having a non-religious one as well. But
right. And non-religious forums. When are we going to see a secular town hall? When are we going to see them come into our groups and have a discussion about the questions that we want to give them? You know, I think that would be amazing.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that, worldwide, I think is missing. I think that that atheists, unfortunately, we haven't always done a great job of uniting ourselves and looking past all the internal issues. So it's if we can do that, I think that secular town hall idea is a good idea. How do we, obviously with a lot of candidates, how difficult do you think it would be to get something like that happening in Iowa?
In Iowa, given the fact that our caucus is February 3rd, I think it would be pretty impossible this go around, but that doesn't mean that we haven't talked about it. We haven't strategized about it. Putting on an event shouldn't be that hard, but I think, you know, be careful what you wish for, because I could certainly see it becoming something like, holy crap, we've never done this, and now we have it. Everyone wants to be a part of it. Even the religious side says it's about time. Or you have the religious side that says, oh, what the hell is this? Get out of our town. They'll be picketing on the sidewalk. Okay, fine. Go picket on the sidewalk, because atheist votes are finally, or voices are finally being heard. But I think there's a real opportunity in play. Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity in Nevada and South Carolina to put something on. I think even if it starts off as check out the biggest room in your public library, reserve a night, start talking to those that have done this before. See what it took to put together an event, put out an invite to the candidates, work with your local Democratic parties, your Republican parties, see what connections they have. You know, say, we want to do this and we just want to see if it'll work. Start putting feelers out on Twitter. You know, is anybody interested in this? Find out who the campaign managers are on the national level and start tweeting to them, start emailing them. Just, you know, I hate to use the word hound because it has a negative, you know, feel to it, but just hound them. And if you've got a committed group of folks and a team of people that are willing to volunteer on something like this, this could be historic. You know, I'm kind of upset that we didn't jump on this sooner and we didn't pull this off in Iowa. I think it would have been great, but the infrastructure just wasn't there, and I wasn't going to try to push it. You know,
so potentially it's something, I guess, for 2024 when there's every chance you're going to have an open Democratic and an open Republican field, as opposed to this year. Obviously, you know, if the Democrats win, it'll be more of an open Republican field, but there is every chance you'll have open on both sides, similar to 2016. What kind of support have you got on the ground in Iowa? Obviously, you're the state director there. Give us a bit of an idea of what does the atheist movement look like in Iowa?
Absolutely. Iowa is one of my favorite things to talk about. I am very, very proud of what we've done in Iowa. We have some long-standing groups like the Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers down in Des Moines that have been leading the charge in this movement for probably the last 10 years. And I'm hopeful that they'll be strong for the next 10 years. They have been the linchpin in Iowa. They have been putting together events. They have put together protests. They have brought in big names. If I remember correctly, before I was involved with American Atheists, one of the national conventions was actually hosted or helped out by them in Des Moines. We have also some very, very strong humanist groups. We have the Humanists of Lynn County down in Cedar Rapids, which is the second largest area population-wise in Iowa. They do amazing work in community outreach, education. They're really starting to show their power when it comes to activism. They put on a Reason on the Hill event every year at the state capitol, which I am proud to be a part of. We're getting this year's set up, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be the best one yet. Last year's was absolutely amazing when you start to have these lawmakers that didn't even know there were atheists and humanists in Iowa, suddenly wanting to take pictures with your group and wanting to come down and learn about all these things. And when they walk away and they go, wow, like, I agree with everything you said. That's a pretty good feeling. We have a baby group of humanists, and I say baby in the most respectful way. They're just starting, but their ideas are amazing. They're the Dubuque area humanists, and they're over by the Mississippi River area, right as you get over by Illinois and Wisconsin. And they helped put a holiday display up in the state capitol. We ended up having 7 out of the 8 displays this year be by an atheist, secular, or non-religious group, which was amazing. Those pesky Christians, they opened up the door and we walked in. So, but anyway, some other really awesome groups. There's a student group at the University of Iowa called Secular Students at Iowa. They refer to themselves as SECSI, S-E-C-S-I. Don't get the wrong idea.
Good marketing.
And they are a fantastic student group and a prime example of what student groups in this country should look like. Working with the Secular Student Alliance, they put up their first ever holiday display. They joined us this year, and that was pretty exciting because one of the things our community needs to do better at is bridging the gap between the adult groups and the student groups. We need to be bringing them together to not only show people around the country and around your state that we work together, but also to teach the younger folks, and these are adults, they're 19, 20, 21, but to show them what's possible, and then to also have it so when they graduate school, if they decide to stay in your state, the transition to your adult group, quote unquote, the adult group is a lot easier, and they can just hit the ground running. And finally, they represent the future. They are more diverse in their thoughts, their life experiences. I don't have a problem. I don't think she has a problem me touting her, but the president of Secular Students at Iowa is a very proud queer Black woman. Mm-hmm. And I love that because she's the face of atheism that nobody gets to see. Mm. She is what the country needs to start seeing. Instead of these quote unquote pissed off straight white guys that think they have the answers all the time. Just last night, her and another woman went to a city council meeting and accepted a proclamation on behalf of the atheists in that town. Hell yes, we need more of that.
We still want the pissed off straight white guys to get out there because we don't want to diminish the numbers.
Right. There's space for everybody and every kind of activism. You know, there was this argument about, do we need to be firebrand or do we need to be diplomat? Why not be a diplomatic firebrand and just merge the two? Know when to use the diplomacy, know when to use force.
Know when to hold them, know when to fold them.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Active atheist politicians in Iowa. Do you have any politicians who are actually out and obviously there's probably a lot of closeted atheists in politics. Do you have any who are out and are happy to speak about atheist issues?
This is a tough one, and this will probably be my last question. I got to get my kids to school, but I've enjoyed every part of this, and I can't wait to come back. To date, I believe there are no open atheists. There might be some that privately identify as humanist or secular. I don't have a problem with this. What I do have a problem with are those that we think are on our team that are unwilling to go to bat for us. Now, I'm not going to say that there's any specific cases where we were told no, but this is kind of what I'm keeping an eye out for. And I want to go back, especially in the same week as Martin Luther King Day. One of his quotes that he had in his letter from the Birmingham jail talked about the moderate white. And it talked about how he would rather just be told straight up, no, I'm not interested, whatever, than to get some kind of lukewarm response of support from his white peers. And my version of this is not based on race. My version of this is based on, if you are either an atheist or a humanist, or you're religious, but you have a secular vision for your government, but you can't come stand in my corner when I put these issues out there, that's troubling. And if you're not willing to use the power of your position to even remotely touch on any injustices that are going on, one that's personal to me is I have been rejected in delivering an invocation in our Senate chamber. I was approved to deliver one in the House, but I am yet, over the last 3 years, to be able to be supported in taking part in my state government. I have a state senator that believes that because he's a Catholic, agreeing to sponsor me would be an affront to his religious beliefs. And so not only do I have a problem with him using his religion against me, my lack of religion against me, but the fact that the system allows lawmakers to discriminate like that and tell me that I can't take part in my state government. And then you zoom out, and now I've emailed every single senator and I can't get a yes from any of them.
Wow.
That's where it starts to get troubling, especially when you have these conversations behind closed doors and you have some of them that say, hey, Justin, I really like what you're doing. And then I just wait, and then there's nothing else. Yeah. And so for me, it's about building relationships. It's about making those relationships strong and positive and beneficial to both sides. But it's also that point of like, okay, seriously, like, where do you stand? Because if you're not willing to help me, and you're not willing to help our community,
each other's time, sort of thing.
Yeah, like, come on.
Do you think it's maybe a situation where we need to change the perception that being an atheist is going to lose your votes or be political suicide? Is there I guess the opportunity to, and similar to, I guess, and I don't like to compare them because I mean they're different struggles are different struggles, but I guess it's when people came out as politicians who were members of the LGBTQ plus community, or various other minorities. Is there any? I guess is there lessons we can learn there as well to sort of be able to go to these lawmakers and say, hey, look, I get that you can't really come out and wave the atheist flag, but
right,
support us.
Right. So I said my last one was going to be my last question, but this one's really good. So I'm gonna answer this one and then I'll log out.
No worries.
You bring up a very good point, and I don't think there's a single answer to it. But the one thought that I keep coming back to is we need to be visible. We need to make ourselves available. And we also need to just be persistent. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was when we go out and we help, or if you're a leader in this community, don't focus just on atheism. So for example, go speak at a Planned Parenthood event. Go speak at an event that defends Muslim Americans' right to be in this country, which I've done. Tell them you're an atheist, or tell them you're with an atheist group, but then move on and make it about everything else. Make it about what you want to do, how you're going to help, or just show them with action. Let your actions speak about what atheism is. One of my most proud moments, we had a synagogue that was vandalized. Somebody spray painted "Jesus saves" and put a cross on the side of it. And I made damn sure that we were one of the first groups to be on scene, that we brought as many people as we could, and we brought as many supplies as we could. We didn't brag about it. We didn't make a big deal about it. We just showed up and did it. And I feel like I want atheists around the country to always keep that in mind. Go volunteer at a soup kitchen. Go volunteer at a homeless shelter. Don't boast and brag that you're an atheist. Maybe wear a shirt, wear an atheist necklace or something. And then when it's all said and done and they say, wow, you're a good group of Christians, or you're a really good Christian man, aren't you? You know, be like my friend Ruth, who's 85 and says, well, I've been accused of being a good Christian woman every once in a while, but actually I'm an atheist, and this is what I do in this world.
So very, very much be in the community and be for the community.
Absolutely.
Have the right motivations.
Well, absolutely.
I want to thank you, and I've got a million other questions to ask you. But
I love it. Keep it coming.
I do respect the fact you've got to get the kids off to school. So look, I guess on behalf of myself, I just want to say how much I've enjoyed this, and I would love to do it again at some point.
Absolutely.
I think that the work that you're doing is very important work, and look, I really want to take my hat off to you for the nonpartisan approach that you take, because I guess speaking on behalf of people who do lean on the right side of politics, atheism can be a very lonely place at times, and I've had
absolutely
who've messaged me, especially in the States, sort of saying, you know, that they're happy that there's a voice out there on their side of politics, and I think your voice is probably the more important one. Well, it is the more important one, especially in the States, because you're saying, forget politics. We've got a common good, and we've got a common goal that we all need to work towards. And I really want to take my hat off and for the work that you're doing there and the work you're doing in the community. So where can people find you? I guess where can people get in contact with you?
Absolutely. Find me on Facebook, Justin Scott. There's nothing fancy about it. It's basically just a personal page. I don't think of myself as a celebrity, so I don't have a celebrity page. My current profile photo is kind of a cartoon of Uncle Sam pointing at you with an American Atheist logo in the top corner. I'm on Twitter at Iowa Atheist 247. I always joke that I thought I was going to be cool and say I'm an atheist 24/7, but Twitter wouldn't let me put the slash. So now I'm trying to tell people that's what I used to weigh, and so there's American Atheist Iowa on Instagram. I don't use it all that often. And there's a little design that I came up with referring or comparing Iowa to Gilead. But anyway, I would love to chat with folks. My email is justinscott@atheist.org. If you're in an area and you that needs some atheist representation, consider being a state director for American Atheists. We'd love to have you on board. We can show you the ropes. Excuse me. And then also one other thing. Remember the hashtag Atheist Voter.
I wrote that down. I'm going to start putting that on the thing.
Absolutely. And this is for all your viewers too. No matter if you're in the, cracks of Alaska or down in the swamps of Florida, if you go out and you do anything related to being an atheist voter, let us know about it. We follow that hashtag. That's our community chat channel, if you will, of how we can chat with one another.